Hey, welcome to the Pioneer Mind podcast. So glad to have you guys join me today. I'm just got a special guest in here today. I'm pretty excited about. I've actually just met him in the last hour or so. I've had a nice visit with him because we had a technical problem and couldn't. I'm too dumb to figure out what's going on, but we're going to give it a shot here. And again, I'm thankful for him coming. Appreciate you guys coming to this podcast. As you know, I really believe in the ability to think and navigate through things. As you know, the Bible says we have a sound mind. He says we're to discern things and to take thoughts captive, casting down arguments against the truth. And that's kind of in me pretty strong that we can think or through, navigate through, learn. You guys need to be reading books, all those kind of things. But you know that I believe the pioneer is the start of every story. And what we got here today is Mike Buck, call sign Alien, and I will refer to him as Alien the rest of the show. Guaranteed has a pioneer spirit just from visiting with him and some of the things he was sharing with me about his career as a pilot, and the changes that have occurred in the Air Force, those kind of things he was sharing. It's pretty powerful insights that he has. But we're here for a different reason today. We're coming here today because Mike Allen has taken it upon himself to uh, get involved in kind of local politics here in Montana, and he's supporter of a specific candidate, Randy Pinocci. He's wanting to express his choice for free speech and the ability to speak his mind. And he's going to be running some radio ads. And what we want to talk about today is kind of what's his motive, what's going on here. Obviously, this is kind of a rare thing for one person to kind of step up in this way. It's kind of interesting. Alien, so you are kind of an alien when it comes to what you're doing, because I don't think it's very common. The common person doesn't typically step into that role to fund a free speech opportunity for like a local political run, you know. And I think this Senate District 12 is so important. Again, we don't realize the state politics are just absolutely important. We all want to focus on the big Fed races, but what I've learned is these local races actually affect my life so much more and so I really care about what happens locally in my community, Great Falls, Cascade, the state of Montana, right? Because we can see it all kind of changing. So we need good leadership. But you've taken it upon yourself to do this, and you, as an alien, and again, I love that call sign from your pilot days. So maybe start with just what's your motive, what got you going to start thinking this way? It's pretty powerful.
When I was young, I used to think that grown-ups knew what they were doing. And to a great extent, they did, particularly back then. You also had the inability as a kid to discern when someone was pulling your leg, if they wanted to get by you. I always assumed that people were truthful because the ones I grew up with were. I didn't realize there was an entirely different set of people who weren't necessarily averse to lying with a straight face.
Mm.
And one thing I've learned in the military is that leadership is everything. If you have great leadership, you're going to have a great military. If you have questionable leadership or leadership with ulterior motives, things fall apart pretty quickly. And we see that ebb and flow. That's also tied to the civilian leadership in Washington, unfortunately. We also have, between periods of strife, great wars and so on, we have a repeating event in which the people who really care about war fighting and know how to make it happen, they sort of fade away, and they're replaced by people who curry favor.
Wow.
And then a lot of really bad things begin to happen. Things that should be happening in the military don't. And consequently, we're not as ready for the next conflict as we ought to be. A great example of that was just in the run-up to World War II. There were a lot of people who were doing their darndest to stagnate air power because they felt, no, we need more battleships. We need more tanks. The airplane was seen as kind of a toy at the time. So when we did get into the war, we had great pilots, but we didn't have great equipment and not enough of it. As soon as the war kicks off, in very short order, all of those who curry favor vanish, and they're replaced with people who know what they're doing.
Gotcha.
Great example of that was the Doolittle raid. After the Japs attacked Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, all of a sudden, oh my gosh, we weren't ready for this. What are we going to do? Well, if you back up a couple of days to, say, December 6th, If someone had walked up to you and said, "Hey, I know what, let's put Army bombers on a Navy carrier and sail close to Japan and have the Army bombers take off knowing that they can't land and go drop bombs on Japan and then go land in China," they would have laughed him out of the room. On December 8th, they were all ears. And that guy was Jimmy Doolittle. And he took what he had and the best pilots that he had, and they made that raid happen. Most people don't know this, but it didn't go as planned. They were spotted by a Japanese ship about 1,000 miles from where they were planning to take off, further out. Doolittle and his guys got together and said, let's go anyway, knowing that they weren't even going to be able to land in China. They were going to have to bail out. But they all felt it was necessary.
Wow.
So they did that. Half of the airplanes were commanded by first lieutenants. They just happened to be the best pilots. So that kind of thinking grows, and you make great leaders, and then the war ends, and the great leaders try to continue to do a great job, and then all of a sudden they hit a roadblock, because now we get back into that phase of politicians in uniform. It's harder to see this in government, but you have the same kinds of cycles. You have people who were in wars and understand the reality of life, and they become elected representatives, and things are okay for a while. And then they retire, and they're replaced by people who play games. One of the things I've been able to do over time is to discern, having watched a lot of great people and a lot of not so great people, pretty quickly, I can discern the difference between the two by what they say and what they don't say. Because you can fool some people, but after you've seen that act so many times, it's pretty easy to pick up.
Again, I kind of commented on that, and I think it's something that's kind of been ripped out of the generations a little bit. I think we're all reactionary. We're all running around reacting and not thinking and observing what's happening right in front of me. What is this person saying? What verb did he use? What tense? What does he actually mean by what he's saying? You know what I mean? In terms of the ability to discern. And I think, in terms of a pioneer mind starts every story is, we kind of set aside thinking and discerning and are kind of reactionary or have another motive, right? And you know what you're talking about? You've been able to discern that because of your life experience and wisdom falling behind you, you can see some things.
I observed that we're in big trouble as a nation. A recent survey, you may have read it in u.gov, which took place last fall, they surveyed the different generations and they said, what do you think about politically motivated violence? Is that an acceptable way to achieve an end? Well, with the Gen Zers, 31% of them say, it depends, but yeah, it can be a good way to do change. So what we see now is there was a great science fiction short story written back in 51 by a guy named C.M. Cornbluth, and it was called The Marching Morons. And in this, a man from the 20th century wakes up from suspended animation several hundred years in the future to find himself surrounded by idiots with an average age of IQ of 45.
Right.
And they're being run by a very small elite of highly intelligent people.
Sure.
And I think I see sort of the same thing happening now. We've taken real education away and we've replaced it with indoctrination.
Sure.
And so what we're seeing is the marching morons who will go out and protest anything. Price of Starbucks, coffee, the weather, you name it. They feel good about it. It's their social life. So that's enough of a problem right there. But lately we've been seeing political figures targeted for assassination more and more and more. And people have already admitted in the younger groups that they think that's okay, as long as it's for the right reason.
Exactly.
And it struck me. We've seen this before. When we had our revolution to throw the British out, we had been living with freedoms for a long time. And when King George decided he didn't like that very much and decided to put the squeeze on us, we said, no, thank you. The Russian Revolution, by contrast, was quite different. You had peasants, and they'd been under the iron thumb, really, of a king, a czar, for a very long time. They knew they didn't like that. And so a guy named Lenin came along and had a cadre of men that were called the Bolsheviks, and they deposed the czar. And immediately in that aftermath, a government called the Duma was established. Now, the Duma had noticed the American model, and so they instituted freedom of speech and a whole other bunch of things you would recognize from the Bill of Rights. That was not what Lenin had in mind. So what Lenin did, the thing was, Lenin convinced everybody that they could have a better life tomorrow and not have to go through this long developmental program to get to a representative democracy that the Duma had in mind. So the Bolsheviks got rid of the Duma.
Right.
And they did that by promising the moon to all the peasants, free land for peasants.
Right.
Well, that didn't happen.
Right.
And we're seeing similar things happen today. Tell someone what he wants to hear, and it'll benefit you. You want to benefit that someone, tell him the truth. So we're not seeing a lot of that. We're seeing a lot of promises that can't be kept. And so this really gets my attention. The would-be assassins are our crop of Bolsheviks that are coming up, who will employ violence to meet their ends. When the Russians found out that living under the Bolsheviks was worse than living under the Duma and worse than living under the Tsar, they voted them out of office. No problem. We're going to dissolve parliament. And then the Russian terror began. Mass executions. So I see ourselves going down that road of marching morons who don't think critically and developing our own crop of Bolsheviks who will employ violence. And the next thing you know, we're a different country.
Don't you think, in terms of, as if I have conversations, and as you, I have visited, I'm thoroughly enjoying this, by the way, that people just don't think it can happen here. Like, not talking about my generation and yours, probably. Part of me, I know we're seeing it and we can talk about it. You're doing a great job here in terms of setting up this. But like for me, I grew up Midwest nights. Like I'd go out for a run and my neighbor, Mrs. Berezanski, would say, "Hey, Mark, I got some extra pie. Come on by." And I said, "Okay, and I'll run your trash out when I'm done." And I go for a jog. And it was just, I mean, the teachers had authority. Everybody had authority. I trusted everybody. And now you see this degradation occurring. And I think you're right. They do approve of change through any means anymore. And they're telling us that. Am I right?
Oh, they're saying it out loud.
They're not even hiding it anymore. And I think for me, sometimes I have, and I'm just being truthful. This is my own being naive. Is I just like sometimes like I hear what you're saying and I know it's true. But at the same time, I'm like, not in America. It's not gonna happen. But I do believe that there is a real challenge coming for the philosophies and how we move forward civilly, and all those kind of things. But what you're saying is, for me, I always hear it and go, not America. Then, well, they are talking it. They're saying it out loud.
There comes a time where you have to not cooperate with the other side.
Right.
They talk about meeting in the middle. Well, here's a simplistic example of when you would not want to meet in the middle. If I hold my arm out and I've got a rock in it, and I say, when I release this rock, it's going to fall to the ground. Well, if you say, no, it'll just hover there.
Yeah.
Then meeting in the middle would be that we'd agreed that it would go halfway down and hover. Right? In other words, there are some things that absolutely are so, and there's some things that cannot ever be. And as soon as we get more and more people talking about things that cannot possibly work, because guess what? We have historical references that tell us they don't work. Then we have to stop playing that game. We got to draw a hard line at some point. No more Mr. Nice Guy, because they're not playing nice.
No. And I used the word earlier in a previous show that our ideas work every time and we should be trying to conquer. And people don't like to use that word, but you need to, politics is the acquisition of power and then the application thereof. And when we vote people in and say we want a certain type of person to represent me, we vote them in, and then they go and operate the complete opposite of what I voted. As a voter, you start realizing this voting matter. Again, they shut down discourse or involvement because it just seems like a rigged game in some ways. And again, I'm probably wrong in my perspectives, but I do see it that way a little bit. Is like, I don't know how many times I've voted for a guy and they go down and they first vote, like I think I shared with you earlier, the first vote, the person as a Republican voted to give the power to the Democrats to make the rules for the session when we had the full, it makes no sense to me. And I come away just scratching my head,
Well, they'll give you all sorts of reasons for that, rationale, right? Self-justification, if you will. They'll say, well, I needed this and this bill, and so I had to agree to that in order to get this and this bill, and couldn't quite get all of it. No. It either is or isn't. And a lot of that is disingenuous. Most people don't know what goes on behind closed doors anywhere. And unless it's a problem right in front of their face, they don't realize there is a problem. In the military, we knew how things worked, and we knew that it was a challenge to perform to the level that we had to be ready to fight the next big one. Yeah. So that hopefully we didn't have to fight the next big one. But to Joe on the street, he didn't hear of any problems, so he didn't really assume anything bad could happen.
Right.
Didn't know how important it was to keep the funding where it was and to keep our strength where it was. Because, hey, if we get rid of half of our Air Force and we're still here, then we probably didn't need that other half, which completely misses the point. And so we have the same kind of problem in government. We don't see what's going on behind closed doors. Unless the problem just leaps out and grabs us by the throat, we assume everything's going to be kind of okay. So you have to start really looking at the people involved. And as you say, what are they really doing compared with what they've been saying?
Exactly.
Right. People may disagree about the current resident in the Oval Office, but one thing's for sure, if he says it, he means it. Okay. There's no doubting what he means.
Right.
And then there are other guys who can say something one day with a completely straight face, turn around the next day and say just the opposite with the same straight face.
Yeah.
And I think those guys are the bigger problems.
Yeah.
So I support Randy Pinocci, not because he has been a good friend of mine for a long time, although he has, but because of that, I've known him for quite some time and I know who he is.
You know his character.
Oh, absolutely. I also know that he works harder than a coal miner.
It's unbelievable.
He really does. What he makes up for in what he lacks in energy, he makes up for in a poor vocabulary. But that's okay. He's a grab it and don't give up until you win kind of guy, and I like that. That's what I've grown up with, and I expect no less from anybody in the military. And so I see that in Randy, and I like it. Now I'm going to get a little bit out of my personal experience realm here, because I'm going to talk about his opponent for a minute. Again, I've never met the guy, but again, I've seen enough charlatans to catch some red flags.
Okay.
And identify one. And usually I'm right. I'm pretty sure I'm right in this case. You look at some of his campaign brochures.
Okay.
The first thing you see is veteran. Notice there are an awful lot of single word messages on these. Veteran.
Powerful message.
Right. But what does it mean? It conjures up an image in people's mind. Okay. They hear veteran and they assume generally conservative. Well, having been in Uncle Sam's Air Force for 30 years, I can tell you that even if someone's a great pilot, there is no guaranteeing that he's not a far left loon.
Oh, okay. I gotcha.
I have had friends who were ruined in their youth by being fed nonsense who can fly great airplanes.
Right.
But they just believe the darndest stuff that can't possibly be true. And they believe what people tell them about people they don't like, whether there's any truth in that or not. So veteran, I would say, good on you. Most people don't serve. They really don't know what goes on in there. They say, thank you for your service. And that's nice too, but they just don't know. And again, they make assumptions about people's character on the basis of the fact that they've served, which is fine. We're all over the map, but, and although I bet you could say probably 75% of the time you'd be right, there's that 25% when you're not. I was astounded when I started talking to friends after I retired from the Air Force and just started having banter with them to believe, you believe that?
Yeah.
And because it's not really something that comes up in day-to-day work.
No, right, exactly.
So veteran, okay, good, check in the box, but not an indicator of being conservative at all. And, conservative, okay, you said it, but tell me why. No, but it's just one word. Republican, okay, that's my party. I want to vote for a Republican. Good. He's a veteran, he's a conservative, he's a Republican. Okay, sounds good to me. And if you keep repeating those simple messages over and over again, pretty soon it starts to resonate with people.
Creates a platform in your brain that this must be so.
Right. Particularly when nobody else is contradicting you.
Sure.
Right? Mm-hmm. You flip over the card. There's a bit more detail in which he's talking about all of the things. This is George Nikolakakis I'm talking about.
Nikolakakis.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
I had to practice that one quite a bit because I'd only seen it in print before. Okay. So I went to one of his campaign websites and heard it. But in one part, he has a warning for everyone. There are billionaires out of state who will secretly funnel money into Montana to influence our political races and elections. And he implies strongly that he's against that, and he's going to do something about it. Well, without going into too much more detail about Randy's opponent, I simply think that people ought to know something that happened about 2 weeks ago. Okay. And this is the reason that almost no one knows about it, and that's why I'm sitting here right now. And that is that is exactly what Randy's opponent was doing. Okay. He was taking big dollars from a Democrat PAC called Fireweed Campaigns. This money was coming in large amounts from out of state, from Democrats to him and to the campaigns of other Republicans as well. Right. And so the Montana GOP Central Committee, the Republican Party of Montana, found out about this. Someone leaked. and they identified several Republicans, self-declared,
Sure.
who were taking money from these Democrat PACs, while all at the same time saying they're conservative Republicans.
Sure.
So the Montana GOP said, okay, these guys here, all of these names, they're frauds.
Oh, wow.
They are not Republicans. And they said, you will send that money back. One did. The other, Nikolakakis did not. In fact, he reacted very violently, and I won't use any of the language that he used to those who were calling him on his game, but off he went, and the Montana GOP directed the media. They said, do not refer to these men as Republicans. In any state, but in some ways, in particular Montana, it's really hard to get thrown out of your party.
Exactly. Yeah.
So especially if you've got a bit of a winning record when it comes to elections.
Sure.
So they said, you are persona non grata. You are not a Republican. Do not call him a Republican. Well, the media does what it wants to. Sometimes they just choose to ignore things. And to date, Randy's opponent still refers to himself as a conservative Republican, and there's nobody throwing any flags on it.
Right, but people don't even know what conservative means. I mean, it's been redefined in so many ways, but the idea is we're conserving things that made this country great, or to actually throw out all the histories. There's institutions, marriage being one of them, or work ethic or whatever. There's things that are worth conserving and not changing, and that's because they've worked for thousands of years. Right. So we're going to be conservative and conserve freedoms, conserve things, inalienable rights from God, all those things, right? Makes total sense to most people, I think. But I think the term conservative is just thrown out willy-nilly. And that's where I, as a voter, sometimes like, boy, I don't know, and that's what's hard. You got to be able to get to know these candidates. And I've asked Randy about a debate. Why don't you guys debate? And we need to be able to see and hear the differences in opinion and voting record and all those kind of things. But none of that seems to get out. You just get the pamphlet day after day in your mail saying, I'm a new conservative, I'm this, I'm a veteran, your words, and so it gets very confusing for the voter.
You bet. There are huge contrasts among states with regard to that. Montana seems to be one of those places where it's just radio ad, TV ad, billboard, yard sign, and that's all you get. I was in Texas a few weeks back with primary coming up with 5 candidates, Republican candidates,
right,
all on stage talking about what they were going to do and why. Right. And then they would take some Q&A. And they would actually talk to each other and say, well, what do you think about this? Do you support this? So it was almost like a Lincoln Douglas debate, only with a lot more people.
Yeah, that'd be great if you could do that kind of stuff. Yeah.
So it's all a function of your state's culture too. And when you talk about conserving things, I think that's the big thing, conserving our culture. We have a culture that works. I mean, we went from never being in space to walking on the moon in 8 years.
Right.
Because we were on the shoulders of giants who had won the war.
Right.
It's not that same world right now. We can salvage our culture, but it's constantly under attack. The Orwellian term progressive, good golly, progressing toward the edge of a cliff is where we're headed. Right?
Most people won't know what we mean by Orwell either. But, I mean, they're using that term.
Well, it's using a term that actually means the opposite of what the word says. Yeah, Orwellian doublespeak is another version of it. So they use that term because it sounds good. Kind of like conservative, sounds good.
Right.
And they assume that there's going to be real progress. Well, real progress doesn't come from promising people things you can't deliver.
Right.
As long as they vote for you. Right. And I'm afraid that's what's going on in this particular race. Yeah. We'll see one thing in the campaign. We'll see something else after the campaign dust settles.
Right.
It's particularly enlightening, again, to see that the Republican Party decided this guy was so far off the beam that they refused to let him stay in the party.
I would think that's incredibly rare. I don't know if I've, and again, I'm a reader. Periphery, I'm a reader. I don't know if I can even think of an example where a state has removed a segment of the actually winning caucus in typical elections for, we're a deep red state, right? But we don't operate like one. That's what I always tell my wife. I said, we're deep red. We're conservative and on and on. And then, like I told you, I go down to the sessions on Thursdays and sit in the executive meetings, and I actually don't even recognize what's happening. I'm kind of just walk out in the hall and scratch my head.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of it's been made up as it goes along.
Yeah.
Even though there are rules.
Yeah.
and Roberts among them. Something people don't recognize is that civilizations do collapse,
Yeah.
and then it takes an awful long time to get back to where they were. People don't realize this, but the Renaissance in Europe was actually when a bunch of people said, you know what? We used to do things differently and they worked a heck of a lot better.
Right.
And we're going to start doing it that way again.
Right.
And all of a sudden, boom, no dark ages. Europe is in full swing.
Right.
And art and music and science are all back again.
Right.
But it takes almost a disaster to have that happen, unless you have people with insight who understand how things ought to be, because we know what works and what doesn't.
Right. And, just even like the name of this podcast, that in terms of the pioneer mind, the mind is about thoughts, what you think, which lead to beliefs, and beliefs form kind of foundational principles, which leads to actions and choices. And, it leads you just right down this road to where you're going to end up. Right. So the way you think, and if you're not thinking, it's a bad deal. But you think about a pioneer person goes into the unknown. They don't necessarily know all the risks. They don't even know the results. They're going because they know what they're doing now is not working. The dark ages ain't working no more. I'm tired of this. I'm going to go and start, So there is this going forward, right? And again, some of those basic little subtle things that I'm talking about in our culture are kind of gone. We're almost trained from kindergarten on, or even birth, to kind of functional, and look at education. Education is turned into function only, like no critical thinking. You're going to be trained to be a welder, and you're going to weld the rest of your life. You're going to be trained to be a teacher. You're going to do this for a career, whatever, so it's functional. We're meeting functions when we should have the ability to think. And, I don't think people are reading, as I've said earlier before, and so some of what you're talking about in terms of just even the political side is all those factors are in there, because, I heard on the previous interview, I asked, well, what do you think the reason is people aren't aware? They just don't care. And I'm like, ooh, that's a bad answer. You know what I mean? But there is something to all that in terms of the way we're thinking as a culture, that the degradation occurring.
They don't care until the fire is next to their feet.
I think that's right on the money.
The knowing how things work and don't work is essential. You have to be able to discern why a particular behavior is moral or immoral. That's critical thought. You have to have a reason for making that decision that that was moral or immoral. Today, that's not what people are taught. They're taught that I have two lists. This list is good things. This list is bad things.
Gotcha.
If something happens that's on that list, it's automatically bad.
Right.
Contrast that with critical thought. I see you walk up behind a woman and push her hard in the back.
Mm-hmm.
Is that good or bad?
It's bad. Terrible.
Is it?
Yeah, I guess I would guess.
Well, the reason you did that was because she was about to be hit by a bus.
Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah, there's this whole context.
You bet. And it boils right down to survival. If you're standing in front of that bus and you step back onto the sidewalk before it hits you, that's survival. So that probably falls in the good category. It's moral behavior because it tends towards survival. On the other hand, if you risk your life to push that woman from in front of that bus, that's moral behavior at a higher level, because you're showing that you care more about that woman at that moment than you do about your own life.
Sacrificial compared to the
solitude. So it's not the behavior, it's the reason for the behavior and the outcome of that behavior. So as long as you're talking about having two lists, and if you look on the list, if it's on there, it's good. If it's on there, it's bad. That's not a good guide. That's
Right.
not a good guide.
So, in terms, you tell them about the radio ads. You're setting it up, and you're doing this privately, all by yourself.
I am, and it's amazing how difficult that is to do. You would think that a radio broadcasting company would know all about how citizens, as private citizens, not part of a campaign, can come in and buy some time to do 30-minute segments in support of a campaign or a proposition or something like that. This is all spelled out in Montana law.
Okay.
There's one radio broadcasting company in town that understands this completely, and the other one has it completely wrong.
Oh, wow.
And in fact, what they advise people to do when they come to them to say, I want to run a campaign ad, is they tell them, we're going to have you do X, Y, Z. And what they're telling them, and I don't think it's intentional, is actually illegal.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So what are they having you act like you're a campaign, or are you just a private citizen and having free speech? What's the wrong?
Comes back to critical thinking.
Okay.
You want something that's easy. Okay, so you run a show. You don't want to get in trouble with the law. You run a radio station. You don't want to get in trouble with the law because no one wants lawsuits, right? So there are FCC regulations out there, and there are companies out there and groups out there. For example, the National Association of Broadcasters, and they publish what I would call a cookie cutter form for people to fill out so that it satisfies those requirements. Problem is that's a national thing and it doesn't reflect state law. And they handed me a form and said, here, fill this out. And I looked at it, I said, it says here I need to mark either candidate or campaign worker.
Oh.
And those are my only two options. I said, this form doesn't apply. They said, oh, you have to fill that out or we can't do this. I said, I can't fill it out. It doesn't apply.
But you're just expressing as an individual your own, free speech rights. That's all you're doing, right?
Trying to. And again, I don't think these people know that they're obstructing free speech.
They don't have the motive to squelch speech. They're just thinking they're obeying the rules.
Yeah, and so consequently, they're getting in the way.
Gotcha.
And then they said, well, we need to have it in writing from the campaign that it's okay for you to run this ad. I said, me contacting the campaign, that's called coordination. That's illegal. That's illegal, actually. And people can get in trouble. So I begin to think, okay, now this is really bad because if I hadn't read this document and just filled it out to get it over with, and some people do that, right?
Right.
Agree to the terms and conditions, then I would have broken the law.
Interesting.
And especially if I'd contacted the campaign. So I tried to explain this to them, and I got the puzzling response of, that's our policy. That's just what we do. We'll look into it someday, but this has been working for a while. Well, I like to say, if it ain't broke, break it.
Okay.
Because there's always something better. And if someone points out to you for your own darn good, takes the time to call you and point out to you that what you're doing is wrong, and here's why, and you don't listen, then a pox on your house. But the problem is it punishes the people in town. Fortunately, the other radio station knew just the opposite, had the right kind of form, knew what was and wasn't acceptable,
Gotcha.
and they got me set up.
Okay, perfect. So you did have an outlet.
I do, yes. My concern is, again, if every TV news station in town would broadcast and say, Randy Pinocci's opponent has been removed from the Republican Party and he's still claiming to be a Republican. If they would just say that, I wouldn't even have to make this radio ad.
I gotcha.
But no one's talking about it.
Right.
Partly because it only happened 2 weeks ago. But you would think that would be breaking news.
Yeah.
It's not.
I'm correcting myself because I think I was aware of this, but I only was aware of it because of a Facebook post by somebody, and it was so brief. Yeah, it was a Facebook post. It wasn't in the news. You know what I mean? I think I got it from a social media post.
Right.
I'm just thinking out loud now about what I do.
So if you don't go looking in the right place.
This is 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago. Yeah. This was revealed. I don't know how long the behavior had been taking place, but they only announced it 2 weeks ago. Curiously, the Montana GOP didn't make a big deal out of it outside of tossing these people out. You would thought that they would have bought some airtime.
Yeah.
And gone on there too.
And maybe they see it as a negative to clean house. Then I guess no one wants to air their dirty laundry or whatever.
I suspect you're right.
But yeah, to some degree, it would be very refreshing to me to
sure,
because that's where I was saying earlier is that I just I'm 61 and have a little bit behind me. I just think I've always had the illusion that everyone's good and there's no, but it just about 10 years ago, it's kind of changed where I was just like, 2008 was a big deal for me. I had, just got the financial kick in the butt, and I was like, people were doing kind of nefarious things within my business that hurt me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, why were they? I couldn't believe that people were doing, I was so naive, but and COVID came along. That was a big eye opener for me. And I just started realizing, man, you better be working to discern the truth. You better be on your game or you're going to be deceived.
Yeah.
It's very tricky, isn't it? The words like on their pamphlets, I'm a new conservative. I just think, I don't even know what that says. Well, what does that say?
Well, from the last presidential campaign, one of my favorite lines was, let's move forward to what can be, unburdened by what has been. Well, what has been is called history. And if you don't pay any attention to history, you will repeat it, only probably worse the next time around. There will not be a chance to recover from a surprise attack next time. We won't have the luxury that the states did to fight a defensive action, build 12,000 B-17s and go knock out the bad guys. It's a come as you are war. And I was talking to the chief of staff of the Air Force, retired chief of staff of the Air Force a few weeks back. And I asked him, why are we still flying the B-52? That was old when I was born. And his answer was, well, it's in good shape.
It's in good shape.
And that's when I said, if it ain't broke, break it.
Yeah.
We can have something a lot better.
Right.
And we're settling for way too much less.
So in terms of settling, the difference, differentiating between, again, I'm not, I don't know Randy that well either. I've actually been around him in terms of events he's put on and listened to him. And I think I shared with you before we started is that this guy comes with more energy. You're exhausted listening to him at the end because he just is a driver, right? He's just driving that nail in terms of his passions for energy, trying to help Montana, the communities, and Denton, the fires. I just know that he's man, he's just an amazing guy. I don't know where it comes from, to be honest with you. And I even asked him that one time or in the show, and he didn't.
He's innately curious and always wants to find something better.
Right.
For example, in the PSC, he has looked at Montana's power grid and thought, well, how can we improve this? And he did his research, and he found that there's a brand new type of power line which weighs a heck of a lot less than traditional ones and has a lot less resistance. And it's not going to be cheap, but you could effectively double the available electricity without having to put up another tower.
It doesn't have the leakage. It doesn't have the sag, the wave. Fires are almost not, it doesn't break during winter.
Yeah.
There's a ton of benefits. It really would be almost not a lifelong solution. Maybe it is. Maybe it goes forever. But it is. There's technologies coming on batteries, on anything you can think of. Every nuclear power. Randy even talked about that, how they're able to recycle that nuclear energy. These ships are out there for years now. I mean, it's all changing, right? So, and most of this too. But he's so knowledgeable, and actually blows me away sometimes what's in his brain.
Going back to what I said earlier, though, I would rather have 100 Randy Pinocchis calling the shots, because I know that they're going to fight for what is, in their mind anyway, true.
Right.
As opposed to saying one thing and doing another. I'll tell you one last story. This is something I do know something about, and that is the Air Force and what happened to the Montana Air National Guard that really first opened my eyes to not only politicians, some of them being nefarious, but even uniformed officers of senior grade being somewhat nefarious.
Okay.
From the perspective of a fighter pilot, our job was to be ready to go fight. And so we train, because those skills are perishable. It's like going to the range to hit golf balls. It never occurred to people in my line of work that there might be people out there trying to take advantage of us. Montana probably didn't know just how fantastic a fighter squadron it had. I met the Montana Air Guard down in Arizona when they came down to go through F-16 school. And for whatever reason, they liked my act and they brought me up here.
Okay.
And loved it because, among other things, out there in the Hayes Bear Paw is the world's best training airspace for fighter aircraft. Hundreds of miles long, hundreds of miles wide, to 51,000 feet, supersonic. Because there's almost nobody out there, and the people who are out there paint American flags on their barns and wave at you when you go by. They love it. Yeah. They love it. Mountains, valleys, every kind of terrain imaginable, which is exactly what fighters need at their disposal. If you go anywhere else in the world, even in the best places, even at the red flag range, there are places you can't go. You have to fly around them. It's an obstacle, artificial obstacle. So we had the best training airspace in the world. We had the best maintainers in the world. I never had to worry about an airplane when I climbed into it, because it was always perfect.
Right.
I might have some small thing crop up, and I would write up a discrepancy, and 10 minutes later be fixed. But nothing ever serious in this outfit. I've been in other outfits where I've had my doubts, but not in Montana. So we had great pilots because a lot of us worked together for a long, long time, and we were a team. We knew, okay, so-and-so is not quite as strong in that area as he is in this area, but I can rely on him. So different world, but some people didn't care what we had, care about what we had. I was the squadron commander. We had just gotten back from another deployment overseas where we did good work. And I walked into the commander's office, and he said, hey, just thought I'd let you know, we're giving up the F-16 and we're going to get F-15s.
Okay.
And I said, that's not a good trade. He said, I know, but they want us to do it. Who's they? Well, the Air National Guard Bureau wants us to do it. Why? Well, they want all of the units who do air-to-air defense to be flying F-15s and not a combination of F-15s and F-16s. I said, let somebody else do it. We're really good at dropping bombs.
Right.
We've got video to prove it.
Right.
And they said, no, well, it's a done deal. Little I realized what done deal really meant at that point. So we broke it. We took all those things we knew about the F-16, all that experience, and threw it out the window. And I had to oversee the transition to the F-15. So off we went to Tyndall Air Force Base, Panama City, Florida, to learn to fly the F-15, which is an enormous airplane. It can barely get out of its own way. Flies entirely differently and in only a few ways better than the F-16 did. I know if I walked out on the ramp right now and there was an F-16 and F-15, I would go straight to the F-16 every time.
You know what's going on.
Yeah. And I know what it can do. So we just, uncle. And so we did it. We converted. Everybody got finished their training. They were fully qualified F-15 pilots. We began to do our air defense alert business in the F-15. And those airplanes went from being marginally well-maintained to being perfectly well-maintained, which I expected fully. Then one day, I came into the office and I was told, oh, the F-15s are going to be leaving. They're going to go to California and we're going to get C-130s.
Okay, so another change.
Right, and a not good one. C-130 is a fine airplane. It has a good mission. But what we've done is we've just taken generations, no kidding, generations of fighter pilots and all that they can do, and we've set it aside. And now we're going to learn to fly an entirely different mission. All of that airspace out there is now worthless. Oh, and by the way, C-130s, you might as well have these C-130s at the North Pole. They are not where they need to be here in Great Falls. C-130s don't fly all that quickly. They have long range. They don't fly quickly. So where you really want them to be is somewhere on the coast. Moving things. Be able to get to the cargo. Right now, to get to that place from Montana, you've got to fly for hours.
Oh, so they leave here to do a mission.
Yeah.
I mean, they don't. Oh my gosh, it's crazy.
And I said, this is crazy. We should never do this because America is going to lose an incredibly valuable asset that we've worked our tails off to build all these years, and we know it works. We're going to throw that away. And I began to hear things that really troubled me. Down in Helena, there were people saying, well, this is a great thing because the C-130s will help us with firefighting. In all this time, that has never happened.
Yeah.
There is a system that you can put into the cargo bay of a C-130 that can help suppress fires. We don't have that system.
Right.
We've never had that system.
Yeah.
It didn't show up. It was never even ordered.
Right.
I began to realize another thing too. Nobody, and I mean nobody in Helena was speaking out against this.
Okay, so no state support for these missions. Okay.
No state support, even though they had for decades been telling us just how fantastic we were and just how great it was that we had a fighter unit here that could do all of this, right? Well, and again, if you want to benefit yourself, tell someone what they want to hear.
Yeah.
So I said, guys, we've got to find people who push back on this. And even the retired officers wouldn't say a thing.
Interesting.
I did. But I was simply a lowly lieutenant colonel retiree who really still cared about his unit. And so consequently, I didn't move mountains when I spoke. And I really didn't expect to, but I wanted to be on the record.
Right.
You should see what's happened to the culture and the morale of that unit since then. I mean, it's just almost unrecognizable. But more importantly, America has lost.
So what you're saying is basically politics was the driving part of that decision, not the mission, not the readiness, not the military strategy. It was politics.
I'll share a few more things without saying names. The F-15s went to a unit in the California Air National Guard in Fresno. Fresno had never, ever, ever been overseas, and they still haven't. They never learned how to drop bombs because in their mind, their only job was to sit in a room and wait for a horn to go off and go jump in the F-16 and go intercept an airplane, which it can do.
Okay.
But they liked doing just that and nothing else. Well, by the way, there was financial incentive for that job. You got paid extra if you did that job because you got more man days. So they really wanted those F-15s because that would keep them in that business. Now imagine an arm wrestling match between Montana and California at the governmental level. We're losing. But we had lost before the 15s even showed up because I hate to use the term drug deal, but the arrangement had been established with the intent of moving those aircraft from the East Coast to Montana so that we would take care of them until California was ready to receive them.
So this was not decisions based on, I mean, this was a long-term plan.
Right. It was not based on national need at all. In fact, it cost us.
Interesting.
And I'm not going to throw out the names of the people who were involved. Let's just say that it worked out well for them.
Right.
And I suspect that's why there wasn't much pushback down in Helena. And why am I talking about all this history? Well, not only do people need to be aware that there are people out there who will actually harm the country if given half a chance because either it benefits them directly or they don't like our country all that much.
Right.
But they also need to be aware that having had different people, had different people been in Helena at that time, things could have been quite different.
Right. They could have fought for you.
They could have fought. They could have at least gone down trying. I know that if Randy Pinocci had been a state senator at that time, he'd have been screaming from the roof. And they might have dragged him out of there kicking and screaming, and he might have lost. In fact, he probably would have, but at least people would know what was going on.
Right. Yeah. No, you're right about that with his voice. No doubt.
Yeah. And by the way, he's one of those guys who he knows what's right. He's got good reasons for it. He won't play the game, and he'll fight for Montana.
Right.
And he'll do that to his dying breath. And that's why he needs to be a state senator now.
Yeah. No, yeah, I agree with you. And I think, again, we need to figure out how to, I don't know. Sometimes I don't know how we know how to communicate in politics anymore. My dad used to tell me the stories that he would sit around a table in the late 50s, early 60s with guys that all these different views that you even mentioned within the military. There's all kinds of different views, right? And they'd argue and this and that, and they're having coffee and they, call each other names. And it was really quite funny the way my dad told the story. And they would even get heated at times. And then you'd stand up, hey, you want to go fishing? You know what I mean? There was not this divide that occurred,
Right.
And it's actually gotten quite vicious and quite nasty. And it's hard to know, sometimes, it makes you want to be silent, but, you can't be, obviously. And you're taking that with your free speech thing with the radio ads. I think that's amazing. Like, again, I don't know if I've ever heard of anyone doing that, taking the time to do that. That's pretty admirable for you to understand it.
Apparently, it doesn't happen very often with that one radio broadcasting group I talked about earlier.
Okay, so they can be looking for them when? Do you know when you're going to kind of get those out?
Well, I'm filling out the last bit of paperwork tonight, the correct paperwork,
Gotcha.
mind you. I've already, using my cellular phone, I've already recorded a 30-second spot, which they'll probably say is, well, why don't you come into the studio and we'll try that again. And it again strikes home. 30 seconds, you can't say a whole heck of a lot.
No.
But the point I try to make again is if you're thrown out of the Montana Republican Party, there's probably a good reason.
Right.
And if they say you're not a Republican, then you can bet you're not a Republican.
Definitely should be taking note of that. Right?
Yeah.
And again, even like today, in our brief little time together, just the amount of history, when you start comparing what you're sharing about the history, about your experience with the F-16, F-15 and that transition, and some of the other things you shared earlier, again, it goes back to, we're not looking at the things that have happened before to kind of help us go forward. We want to go forward without, I believe there's a philosophy now that everything old is no good. Everything old is no good. I mean, even young people kind of talk that way. It's only the new stuff that's going to be the good thing, and everything old is bad. And I'm like, I'm not so sure going backwards would be going forward.
Again, that was the Renaissance. With the way they said these dark ages are really terrible. It used to be better. What were they doing to make it better? Let's start doing that again. It's a pretty simple thing. Most people don't even know about that.
Yeah, I did a series years ago. I wrote We're Not Real Men Anymore. I had chapters and things I wrote like real men speak. Real men go into the unknown, not knowing the risk, but still go. You know what I mean? And I think, again, that's old virtuous talk, I mean, maybe it isn't, but it seems like anything like you talk that way, people's eyes glaze over and they're just kind of ignoring you.
Life is pretty easy for us.
Yes.
It is. Even when we go out of our way to make it difficult, some of us.
Right.
But life has become a little bit too easy.
Yeah.
If a guy spends more than 5 minutes working on his hair every day, then something's wrong. Okay. And the idea that what happened 30 years ago is no longer applicable. Well, that's absolutely a lie.
Yeah, I
Absolutely.
read a book about it. It's called, I can't remember the title, but basically the synopsis was that the rejection of the old um, is absolutely strong in our culture now. Anything old has got to be rejected. We're going to go forward, and so virtues, hard work ethic, whatever, just the basics that we take for granted. That my wife and I both talk about. We both had jobs, and it sounds crazy. I was a big kid. As you came in, you commented, what did you eat when you got here? But I was wheeling concrete to make pools at 10, 11 years old and mowing lawns. My wife had paper routes and would pump gas in Superior, Montana. And she's just a kid, and and, and we we don't know any different. You know what I mean? In terms of, does that make sense?
People don't like to admit that conspiracy theories can be true. And if you look at the pattern of leftists in history, it's always the same path. The current culture is not amenable to us running the show. So we're going to gradually but continuously undermine the culture. We're going to chip away at it. One of the ways we're going to do that is we're going to bring in people who believe exactly the opposite. And we're also going to quit teaching vital things in school, like math and history. And heck, when was the last time you saw a school that taught Latin?
Right. I had 4 years of Latin. I had a classic Christian education, and I'm not exaggerating. I learned Plato, Socrates, you name it, Seneca.
Yeah.
I mean, Stoicism, Marcus Aurelius, Latin. I mean, I took physics, I took computer science, it sounds absolutely crazy, the education. I tell my wife, I said, I am sometimes shocked. I did not know what was happening as a young man to me in terms of my education.
Well, getting back to the Renaissance, there's that term, the Renaissance man.
Yeah.
The Renaissance man is someone who is reasonably good at a lot of things.
Yeah.
He knows a lot of different things. He can do a lot of different things.
Right.
He can fire a rifle. He can build a bridge. He can comfort the dying. He can heal the wounded. You've got to be able to do a lot of different things, or else you become specialized. And specialization is for insects.
Well, that's what I was trying to say earlier with the functional education. It's exactly what they've done. They want you to have you pigeonholed in one thing. Right. And no thinking about anything else. I swear that's a big deal in education.
So where I went to school in Ohio, the public schools insisted that we do all those things.
Yeah.
Wood shop, metal shop.
Where'd you go to school in Ohio?
Columbus.
Okay. I'm a Talmadge boy.
Oh, okay. There you go. Yeah.
And I went to Grove City College. I don't know if you're familiar with Grove City, private school north of Pittsburgh. Mandatory 6-day week. Back then you had dress code, couldn't walk on the grass. But I mean, I look back on it, and at the time I could not figure out, and I am still quite negative about my college education a little bit, because they even wrote a letter years later. Your class, your graduating class, doesn't really fund the alumni like the other classes. But they got a little heavy-handed at that time on us, and they even admitted it in a letter. In terms of, we're adults, stop treating us like children. Yeah. You know what I mean? I played basketball there and all those kind of things, but I look back on it, though, I can't even tell you that. I mean, I took symbolic logic. You know what that is? Symbolic logic is mathematics through symbols. Yes. And you can take English language and you break it down. I don't know if you ever did the diagrams with sentences. Oh, yeah. They don't know what you're talking about when you do a diagram of sentence, right? But you would take it, and the noun, the verb, and this all had mathematical values, and it would be bifurcated in the middle, and it logically needed to equal both sides. So mathematics in language, I got a D in that class. But to this day, I'm still fascinated by the idea of connecting mathematics with language.
Yeah, that Renaissance man thing, people don't understand that collection of different skills is not strictly additive, it's multiplicative. Meaning, well, my first degree was in business. I minored in music. Okay. Because I was in the best marching band in the entire world at the Ohio State University. So
you can go there to watch that, not the football game.
By the way, we don't have sign-up day, we have tryout month. So next thing I knew, I thought, well, shoot, I'd really like to be a test pilot. I was in ROTC at the time, and I looked it up, and it said, must have degree in engineering or physics. I said, Okay. Because although I'd been good at math, it really hadn't blown up my skirt, as I like to say. But if I have to have it, I have to have it. So I found out I was really good at physics, and I got a physics degree. And now all of a sudden, I'm looking at everything differently because I've got the arts background, I've got the business learning, I've got physics, and I can see how things actually work in the big old world.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, I started to make connections that other people don't make because they're in that narrow lane. They do this one thing. Even a brilliant computer engineer, if that's all he does, if he can't play a trumpet or whack a golf ball or you name it,
100%.
Yeah.
But again, we're getting off a little bit.
Yeah.
And that's fine. I enjoy visiting with you.
But the thing to drive home on that is the universities have become complicit in the dumbing down and the making of the marching morons. You go to a university that used to be a wonderful place, to include Ohio State, and you look at what they're teaching now and the types of degrees that people are getting. No. Although I do have a guideline for people. If you want to know whether or not a course of study is an actual science, if it has the word science in it, it's not a science.
Oh, that's interesting.
Political science, social science.
I'll never forget that as long as I live.
Yeah.
I'll look at that every time.
Think about the hard sciences, chemistry, physics, math. Okay. No need to put science in there because everybody knows they really are sciences.
That's really fascinating.
Yeah.
I'll never forget that.
They have to throw that word science in there to grab some legitimacy.
Right. So, well, anyway, you got ads coming up. Everyone listening for Mike. He's coming. And,
hide your kids.
I think it's good. I think you're setting an example for leadership. It's that real men go into the unknown. You don't even know the results, but I think it's good you're doing it. And I'm excited to meet you. And, earlier we were visiting because I had the technical problems. I mean, still might, we'll see, but I don't think so. But, no, it's been good because I think we need thousands of you getting out there and giving your point of view. And we got, again, it squelched real men speak, real men have a point of view and just say it, and we're kind of driven into silence in our own families.
We choose it. We choose it a lot. At least we old folk do. Those who thought that retirement was all about relaxing and playing games and watching TV. We find out pretty rapidly that after about a week of that, it's not interesting anymore.
No,
and if you've noted some of the things I've noted, you begin to realize that you have an obligation to pass it on. That's what Woody Hayes used to say when I was at Ohio State. He used to say, pay it forward.
Right.
And so that's what I'm trying to do in this. This is why I'm supporting Randy, because I know that he is an infinitely better choice than his opponent. And so if I can make a difference in that fashion, then I'll have had a good couple of weeks.
Well,
that's for sure.
And I pray for success for those ads to reach the right person at the right time. That's really the goal, right?
As long as they're not on at midnight.
No, I won't do that.
No, they won't. They won't.
Well, I appreciate you. Thanks for coming. And again, I am so grateful for our visit. And again, I hope to see you and meet you again. I'm sure we will now that we've ran across each other. And don't be afraid if I yell at you, Mike, alien. Some guy's yelling at me.
Won't be a problem. It reminds me of that great life I used to have. And I'll leave you with this. Young ladies, do you want to know how your date with the fighter pilot is half over?
Oh, no. Go ahead.
He says, well, enough about me. Let's talk about my jet.
So that's it. Thanks, Mike.
My pleasure. Thank you.